time by downloading the free TuneIn app. Once you do, search Rainier Avenue Radio. And remember, do not curse out your fellow drivers. This has been your Rainier Avenue Radio traffic update.
All of us have struggled through the COVID-19 pandemic, and many of our communities have been particularly hard. Some things definitely need to change, but a few things should stay the same, like protecting your child from serious diseases you can prevent now. Preventable diseases like measles, mumps, and whooping cough. Is camp, childcare, or in-person school on your family's agenda? Give your child a healthy and safe summer and school year by making sure they're up to date on vaccinations and well child visits. You have the power to protect. Call your healthcare provider to find out what vaccinations your child is due for and make an appointment today. If you need help finding a provider, visit parenthelp123.org or call the Help Me Grow Washington hotline at 1-800-322-2588. An interpretation is available.
Different rules apply when it gets this late, you know what I mean? It's like after hours.
Whatever gets you through the night, it's all right.
Hello, I'm an unpaid spokesman for DJ Sotovaci. I'd like to invite you to listen to his free-form music show. It's popular music the way it was never intended to be heard. Whatever gets you through the night, late nights, here on RainierAvenueRadio.world.
Babe, this computer in here is not turning on.
You probably have questions about COVID vaccines. Here are some answers about how they're being made.
How are COVID vaccines
being... I don't have time now.
Usually, vaccine testing and production are separate steps. But because of the pandemic, vaccines are being developed on parallel tracks. So both steps are happening just at the same time.
How are the vaccines being tested?
Right now, several different COVID vaccines are in testing. Each go through multiple clinical trials with up to thousands of volunteers.
How do vaccines get approved?
Not all COVID vaccine versions will make it to the final stages of testing and approval. Produced vaccines that do not pass clinical trials will be destroyed. But for those that do pass, a team of medical experts will examine test results and possible side effects. If the vaccine is effective and safe, it gets approved and gets to you. Go to covidvaccinewa.org to learn more. A message from the state of Washington.
This is Rainier Avenue Radio.world.
You're listening to Heartbeat Radio. I'm your host, Cindi Bright. Heartbeat Radio is a conversation aimed to take the pulse of corporate America. Opportunities for people of color, we're getting lost in the shuffle of change. I'm that provocateur of change. The hearts of corporate America are addressed. Access and opportunities will be accelerated for all people. Through Heartbeat Radio, you will gain a deeper understanding of what is necessary for change. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Heartbeat Radio. I'm your host, Cindi Bright, here on this hot evening. I'm sweating pretty hot. It's 83 degrees in my office here, so you'd think I could lose an ounce by sweating like this, but that isn't the case. Hey, we have a good show for you tonight. It's a different kind of a show. Occasionally I bring different business people on. We spend a lot of time on politics. Tonight, we're going to go into a deeper dive about corporate America and its tormenting, abuse, and discrimination of Black women. Joining me, co-host here, let me bring Joy in. Before I welcome our guests in, there's a couple things I want to say before I bring them in. First off, I had Dawn Bennett scheduled to come on the second half of the show. I did speak with her counsel, and she is not going to be coming on, but I want to talk to people about what's going on with her in the city of Seattle. So I'm going to channel Dawn Bennett's issues with the city. Let me have you all get out a piece of paper too, if you want, because I want to make sure that I leave with the audience here her attorney's name in case there are other people in the city impacted by this. His name is Oscar Desper. It's Desper. Phone number is 206-521-5977. I'll repeat that again at the end of the show, but I wanted to, regretfully, Dawn wanted to be here, but when you hear some of these things that we're going to talk about today, you'll understand why she's not able to join us. Before I welcome in our guests, we have a prestigious law firm, two attorneys out of the Bay Area, out of Oakland, that are going to join us for this conversation tonight. This firm is called want to make sure I say it right. Medina Orthwein. We have two of their partners. We have Felicia Medina and we have Shauna Madison joining us this evening to have this conversation. Let's welcome them in. Shauna and Felicia. Hey, there they are. Welcome to Heartbeat Radio, ladies. How are you this evening?
Oh, okay.
Doing well, thank you. Thank you. I think Felicia may be having some audio issues. Can you hear us, Felicia?
Can you talk, Felicia, so we can hear you? I don't think she can hear us.
All right, I'm going to keep trying, producer, see if there's anything on our end that we can do to help her. Okay, she says she's going to go use the phone. These two attorneys are the attorneys. I copied the link when I published the show, are responsible for the settlement at Kaiser Hospital. I've seen different figures attached to that settlement, but the last one I saw was $11.5 million class action lawsuit. And we're going to talk about class action lawsuits this evening, what they are, and pretty much why they're necessary to progress these issues that Black people are fighting for tooth and nail with the abuse and the toxicity of what happens to us in corporate America. So, I want to, let me just start off by asking Shauna the question, would you like to describe to our audience what is a class action lawsuit?
Yes, absolutely. And thank you. Thank you so much for having me and Felicia. She'll be here any moment now. Yeah. But yes, that is a great question. A class action lawsuit is a vehicle in which an individual or multiple individuals can bring about a lawsuit on behalf of a larger group. Let's say for race discrimination, sex discrimination, gender, disability, etc. Any protected class, you can bring a lawsuit on behalf of that larger class. Now, when you get more into the legal weeds of it, we have to argue numerosity, commonality, typicality, adequate representation. That's the legal mumbo jumbo that we won't go into today. But I can tell you that a class action, it's when individuals are seeking monetary and programmatic relief on behalf of that larger class.
Okay. And why would you say that class actions are necessary in order to progress these issues?
They're absolutely necessary because if once you get in, right, and hopefully resolving, or even if they're not in and you have to litigate the case, you can effectuate so much greater change for a wide number of people, more so than you can if it's just a lawsuit on behalf of yourself, right? So for a prime example, is the Kaiser case, where it affected, hundreds of Black employees at Kaiser rather than just one. And so if you look at very details of the settlement, the proposed settlement, there's programmatic relief on a larger scale, which I believe is the only way you could get that is through a class action.
Shauna, are you saying that because of it being class action, they're going to go back and look at those, what do they call it, administrative support and job categories, those categories? Does that mean that they're going to go back and reimburse, or what is the word, go back and give money to those people, those employees who should have been compensated correctly then and now they haven't been? Are they going to go ahead and redo and do that moving forward?
So let me interject for just a second. Why don't will you, before you answer that, explain the merits of what the issues were in Kaiser? Were they strictly about pay? What were the circumstances there surrounding that?
And I'm going to pass this to Felicia to do, because she was so well involved. When I got to the firm, Kaiser was in the bag. So I was like, I made a good choice of coming here. So I want to turn it over to Felicia so that she can give you the details, since she was there since its inception.
Okay. Can we hear you, Felicia?
I hope so.
Yay, we can hear
you all and everything. Tech problems are always
yes.
But with the information age, we get to have important discussions like this, and it can be memorialized and played. And, hopefully there's a lot of people out there that really, really need and want this information, because now is the time to eradicate racism in the workplace. It's where we spend all of our time, where we devote, we're kind of, working to live instead of, living to work, or vice versa. And the Kaiser case is a good example of the healthcare industry, racial disparities, and in terms of health disparities run amok. And then you have an employer who we worked with on a pre-suit basis to broker a class deal. And that settlement focused on pay and promotion, as well as EEO policies and corporate culture. And so what we saw was there was a significant pay disparity for Black employees at Kaiser, as well as under promotion. And what that settlement entails is, to answer Joy's question, back pay. And then us as plaintiffs' counsel get to monitor the equity analysis that everyone should be doing, every single institution should be doing on an ongoing basis for a period of time going forward. And so in there's also, lots and lots of papers of what the programmatic relief entails. In addition to the equity audits that are monitored by the impacted group, here being us, plaintiffs and plaintiffs' counsel, there's a number of things that speak to culture. There's a number of things that speak to not having a culture of retaliation when you do bring things forward. And there's a lot of things with respect to, like, what does all this diversity, equity, and inclusion stuff really mean? How does it look in tangible, practical application? And what lens are you looking at, at that under? Because you can always pay a ton of lip service to talking that diversity talk. And sometimes I don't want to hear the word diversity anymore. Equity is a much stronger word. I like that word. That's sharing the power. That's what we're really all about here. And that's the only way to kind of really look at racism in the workplace and make bigger dents, because it literally is, as we'll get to some of the topics later, is leading to loss of life. And a lot of suffering, and a lot of employees are suffering in silence. And so when you have a very powerful tool like the class action vehicle, we need to kind of take note of the stuff that's coming out, in this era. So that way, this is, again, not a moment, this is a movement. And, we really do owe it to ourselves and everyone else, to make that a movement. And so for all the non-Black or brown and white allies, and I'm talking to Latino people there too, it is time to really look at anti-Black racism, understand that we're all a part of it. And if any white folks want to use their privilege, and to become co-conspirators or allies in their workplace to demand accountability, of course, it will always also benefit you, because there is a significant gender pay gap. It's worse for Black and brown women. But it's a time where, you can put, raise your hand and raise your voice and say, corporations and public employers, there needs to be accountability for what you're covering up or not talking about or failing to name. And even when you do name it, where's the data? We are smart people. We graduate with degrees in greater rates than white men in some instances. So, let's see the data. We can definitely talk, real numbers here and real things, to like not just have like some kind of mentorship program. That's great. Mentorship is great, but it takes a lot more, especially when you're coming from a history where there's not a baseline understanding of, racial atrocities then, now, and hopefully not so much more in the future.
Felicia, I'm glad, that you described it the way you did. Part of the reason why I had originally had the local City of Seattle lawsuit brought into this equation to come on too is because the circumstances that are described in the newspaper about that organization are exactly what you're talking about at Kaiser, are exactly what I went through in my own lawsuit, are exactly what every Black woman who's coming forward talking about, is the suffering, the marginalization, and the oppression. And so from your perspective, Kaiser is a publicly traded company. And so the, big Fortune 500, big Fortune 100 companies, is there an uptick in the amount of cases or issues that you see coming forward now?
Yes. There have been a number of very high profile race discrimination cases, and we need to be focused very specifically on race here. And there's been a number of cases filed by public employees as well as in the private sector in tech and STEM. And so what we're seeing is that if public employees, is different than these publicly traded companies, it's the taxpayers' dollars. And so even more so when there's retaliation, you're also suppressing speech and things of that nature because it's the government actor. And so Shauna has been integral in filing a case against the city of Long Beach. And then we also have a case against the city of San Francisco. So what the hope is here is that if oftentimes public employees have to kind of just get the scraps from the private sector. But here there's an opportunity for public sector employees, including the case and that litigant that you just spoke of, to really help private sector employees out and say, you as representatives of our government, us as public servants, we're not going to just be thankful to have a job for our own government. You need to be looking at race and gender disparities in terms of employment outcomes. Discipline, there should not be criminalization of people in the workplace. There should not be disparate terms, of employment such that you are more likely to be terminated or disciplined if you are Black. And that, those types of things are observable. You can name it, you can see it anecdotally, what it does to the spirit and to a community. It can have huge, impacts. And so what the hope is that, public employees, if you see that, you can raise your voice in a collective with other people, with your union, without your union, and then, demand better of our government. It kind of takes away from how in the federal system, there's been a lot of very neoliberal stomping down of class actions as some type of, windfall. That's not deserved, as opposed to, really looking at what these anti-discrimination statutes say, what they stand for, and, making sure that there is actual teeth to these statutes. It's great that Title VII has been expanded to include LGBT folks. Yes. And you need to be looking at these issues in terms of the intersectionality of the situation. If you have a typical gender class action, look at the disparities for Black and brown women. You can have things in your settlement agreements that look particularly at that population and the specific harm that's been, that population has been subjected to. And so it's looking at corporate policies, and no corporate policy is going to say I discriminate against XYZ people. Like, you don't get a cookie for the lowest bar possible. Right. So, okay, yes, you have an anti-discrimination policy. You're required to do it. You're required to do sexual harassment training. And, so beyond that, you have the power to look at, as leadership, to look at the outcomes in employment and remedy it. It shouldn't be that the bottom line or what the PR will be if you actually take time to engage in these issues in a very long, process that will be hard. I'm sure it will be very, very hard for the powers that be, but just think about how hard it is on the other side, and just think of what actually can make you, feel, better, about what you're doing, everything for your employees, to make sure that when you put something like Long Beach doesn't discriminate or San Francisco doesn't discriminate, that you actually looked at the problem and made some, and opening up that dialogue for some, real change to take place.
Love that. I'm going to ask another question here, and I don't know, maybe not a question I can ask the two of you, but what is a red flag that Black women can look for or should be looking for, Felicia or Shauna, in settings like that? I worked for a sister company up here, Group Health, in Washington State, and I'm thinking now, it's too late now, but in meeting Cindi, reading her book, there's so many times I should have spoke up and I didn't. And so many things I'm thinking now that happened that,
I have a perspective about that, and I want to see, Felicia, if you and Shauna agree with this.
So my question is, because I'm sure our listeners are like, so what should I be looking for? I might have a story, but what's that? What's one of those red flags that someone can say, that's not right? That doesn't pass the smell test.
I think it's the performance management process.
Oh.
So let's talk about Shauna and Felicia. Was the performance management process a piece or pivotal in this whole issue that you dealt with at Kaiser?
Looking at companies, I'll talk about looking at companies and their data writ large. On average, what we see is that, women all races and ethnicities usually score higher on performance reviews. If you are looking non-white, people will be scored lower. And there's a number of reasons why that, but that performance review process can control many, many aspects of your employment and your career advancement. And so there is lots of discrimination with respect to a lot of employment policies, but performance management being the number one of them. And, you know, in terms of, I'll shift to Shauna to look for red flags, but a lot of times when you look at performance reviews, you can see bias all up and down. And, you know, or not measurable objective things to back up this feedback. And so, you know, yes, performance management is huge. There's a lot of studies that show, and I think, Cindi, you talk about this, the middle management level is kind of, you know, the people that are perpetuating a lot of this harm and a lot of these disparate outcomes. They really, really kind of abuse that power there. You know, maybe top leadership is, you know, polished enough and knows how to, you know, XYZ enough to not get caught in that. But, you know, it's something about performance reviews and how performance management is carried out and how there's either calibrations or not, and how, you know, you don't standardize, you know, the objectives across the board that can lead to a lot of discrimination.
Shauna, did you have something to add with that?
Oh, yes, I completely agree with everything Felicia said. I just have like 3 other potential like red flags when you said that. One of them being, if you look at the people in the high management levels and you don't see a person of color, that's obviously like the biggest red flag, right?
Or one.
One, right? Or you
One
don't see
male.
a woman, like at the very least, like throw a woman up there. But like, if you look at the high level management people and you do not see any level of diversity, that's a huge red flag. Also, if you look at the people who are, you know, legally and technically classified at a lower rank and they've been there for years, good old Shirley working down there in the basement for 20, 30 years and no promotion at all, that's a huge red flag. As sweet as she may be, she probably has a wealth of knowledge that could combine all of the top people's knowledge, but she has not been promoted. Huge, huge, huge red flag. And also, just to stem off of what Felicia just said, the constant moving of goalposts. So maybe they do give you a performance review and you're doing really great. And then when you actually get there to discuss it and you see that you maybe are not meeting expectations, right? You're like just getting the bare level thumbs up, but no promotion. And you ask, why did I not get exceeds expectations or some other high ranking performance review? And they say, oh, it's these 5 reasons. And those reasons were never in your purview, because if they were, obviously that employee would have met those goals, because, you know, oftentimes we're a very hardworking group of people. So moving of goalposts is also a very thing that you need to look out for. It's a huge red flag.
I think you guys read my book before you came on air, talking about these HR issues. That is exactly, I actually talk about even the succession plans, how people are put on succession plans, but in 30 years of me being in HR, I can't recall a Black person or brown person actually ever coming off of a succession plan because the goalpost was moving all the time. And so every time it came time for the selection of that role, all of a sudden there were these competencies that needed to be had that this person didn't have. And so I have said that the performance management system is the 911 system in corporate America. And so, you know, the woman who called Central Park calls 911 to get the Black man arrested. In corporate America, it's activating a performance improvement plan. And once those are activated, you have 0 chance of succeeding. That's just the vehicle and the process that they're using to destroy lives. Talk more about the people at Kaiser. What were some of the things that you heard from their perspective about abuse and about toxicity? What kind of things were coming out in your investigation?
You know, I definitely want to talk about corporate cultures writ large, you know, across multiple industries, because we see very similar things, whether it's Kaiser or not. And, you know, corporate cultures that, there's a lot of discussion about microaggressions. There's a lot of discussion about unconscious bias. There's a lot of discussion about, but it's missing the mark. It's not actively debiasing. It's speaking to, a different lens other than the person who's actually been subjected to the touching of the hair, and you speak very eloquently, and all these, very stereotypical views. In any one moment, whether when you're dealing with life and family and anything at all that has a racialized aspect to it as well, that one microaggression can really put you, over the edge. And you feel gaslit. And then a lot of clients come to us and they say they feel crazy. And so we are telling you, you are not crazy. And even if you feel a little bit crazy or did something a little bit crazy, wonder why, because you are in this environment that is toxic, to your soul. And so corporate culture is very, very important in discussions like this. The efficacy of training needs to be understood in proper context. It needs to be understood that it's not just a module that you can do in one instance. There's a lot of training that needs to be done of middle managers in particular. And every single thing that you do needs to have an equity, lens to it in terms of succession planning, in terms of looking at performance reviews. So there's both the qualitative and quantitative aspect of this. Qualitatively, we were speaking about corporate culture, and we can talk about it, and there's any one number of microaggressions, which I wish we would stop using that word. Like, it's already minimizing the impact from the beginning. And in the law, it doesn't help us because our standard, for meeting a hostile work environment is often severe or pervasive. So if you're starting from, microaggressions, these are aggressions and they're ignorant. And in the law, we have to prove intentionality. And so when we talk about unconscious bias, we need to understand that, there's unconscious bias and we have to prove intentionality in the law. But unconscious bias, a majority of the time, when people are stressed, and most people are stressed, you're going to divert to your biases. You're going to be even harsher. So a lot of times we get this equal opportunity, bad manager, they're bad to everyone, so how could it be discriminatory? And that's a complete and total cop-out, because it is going to be felt more acutely on the person who's from a marginalized group, and it's going to be harsher, it's going to be way more inhumane, and it's about stress and power and things like that are in the workplace. And so on the quantitative side, that's where you look at is there a disparate impact of our performance review process on marginalized groups? Are people being underpaid when you control for variables? What is our promotion rate? And then understanding that even if you do get some folks up there who are diverse, that representation isn't the end all be all. It's not that, a lot of times people, for self-preservation reasons, when they get to those positions, they have to, turn away. But the onus is not on the people of color, to fix your race problems. You know what I mean? They're trying to just climb, survive and play this capitalist game. And so you have to kind of look at the full spectrum of, what diversity means. How do you really change culture? Yes, it's hard. It's hard, but it's not impossible.
That's right.
The leaders, they have such power. Like, if they want to go to the moon, then they're going to go in space. They're going to go to the moon and go in space. So I think that you can apply all that gusto to looking at, employment outcomes that are both quantifiable and qualitatively, you can prove and run culture surveys that are truly anonymous. So they actually do capture, because we're looking at stats, and something like 50 to 60% of employees who complain get some form of retaliation. And so that's why you need to have very, truly anonymous outside third-party people. You can call us. Me and Shauna would be happy to take a look at all and work with you as problem solvers at your policies and procedures to see where the racism is more acutely observable and needs to be undone.
So let me
just
ask
answer
you.
My other question was, what's the first step somebody should take besides reading Cindy's book?
Let me insert one other thing I want to ask before we get, because I do want. I want to make sure your question, Joy, about tangible steps. I'm going to bring them back in on the second half because we haven't gotten through the entire list of questions yet. I wanted to ask, because you commented about training, and when I personally don't believe training works, and so these folks need to go, and that is what I call for, is just the cleaning out of the middle management where this racism exists. Because the question becomes, can you truly transform a culture when it is full of racists?
Yes.
And so what are your thoughts about that before we go to a break here in 1 minute?
I absolutely agree with you that if there is a tangible evidence that there's a significant bad racist actor in the organization, you can't move forward without eradicating that person.
Correct.
And so it's like one of those sayings where you can't heal where you were traumatized, right? You'd have to move. How can the employees heal when they're in the same purview and space as a significant racist bad actor? So I 100% agree with you, Cindi.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I wondered about in your findings and in your your statements about, when you raise issues as a Black person, then you become the target. And so the safety of Black people in organizations, it doesn't exist. And people wonder why they feel that Black people are performance problems. How about the fact that they're actually traumatized? And how about the fact that they are actually in fear? They're in the workplace in fear. And those things are never discussed. In my career, when you try to raise those issues, there's so much defensiveness about trying to deal with these quasi quote unquote managers. Before we're going to pick this back up, we're going to have to take a quick 3-minute break, and then we're going to pick back up with Joy where you just left off. So we'll be right back.
That up in Saks, our favorite Black businesses. Assuming I'm rooting for everybody that's Black. Yeah. Yeah. Assuming I'm rooting for everybody that's Black. Yo.
This is Paul Pearson, host of Star Time. And when I'm not using my GPS to navigate the land of 1,000 dances, I'm listening to Rainier Avenue Radio .world.
This is a Rainier Avenue Radio .world public service announcement. New school year is just around the corner. Did you know? In order to attend classes and play sports, your child needs to be up to date on all vaccines required for school before the first day of instruction. Now is the perfect time to catch your children up and avoid exclusions. Public Health Seattle and King County invites you to come on out to 3 free back-to-school clinics. August 3rd, 3 to 7 p.m. at the Taft-Sigali School-Based Health Center in Federal Way. August 7th from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. at the Kent YMCA. And August 11th from 3 to 7 p.m. at the Renton High School Health Center. Clinics are open to all kids ages 4 to 18, offering all vaccines required for school entry, plus the COVID vaccine for everyone eligible. No insurance or proof of residency required. To learn more, visit kingcounty.gov/find-a-clinic or on RainierAvenueRadio.world.
This is Big Poppy, host of Jazz from the Cabinets. Join me each week for a listening tour of the first century of jazz, an eclectic mix of Dixieland, big band, cool jazz, bebop, contemporary jazz, world jazz, all jazz in all forms. That's Jazz from the Cabinets with Big Poppy on Rainier Avenue Radio, streaming worldwide on RainierAvenueRadio.world.
Yo, what's good? It's D-Money, and you should definitely check out Fresh Juice every Wednesday, 9 to 11 Pacific, right on Rainier Avenue Radio.
With pint-sized Patron, P-Treasy to Don. Y'all be sure to clean your mirrors as we play brand new hip-hop and R&B from locals and worldwide.
It's ID Yourself, a.k.a. Malcolm Flex. Make sure you check out Fresh Juice every Wednesday, Pacific Standard Time from 9 to 11 p.m. And to get those exclusive interviews that we be doing.
Sipping a brand new Fresh Juice every single week.
Yeah. Every Wednesday, 9 to 11, Rainier Avenue Radio. Yeah.
Do you want to reach out to the Vietnamese community in Seattle? Just advertise in Le Viet Bắc, that is Northwest Vietnamese News, the longest running Vietnamese language newspaper in our region. Go to nvnorthwest.com.
This is Rainier Avenue Radio .world.
That up in Saks, our favorite Black businesses. Assuming I'm rooting for everybody that's Black. Yeah. Assuming I'm rooting for everybody that's Black. Yo.
Welcome back to Heartbeat Radio. I'm your host, Cindi Bright, this evening, along with my co-host, Joy Stanford. We originally had scheduled Dawn Bennett to be on the second half of the show. I stated at the intro of the show she will not be joining us tonight. She had scheduled to, but some developments have occurred in her case, and so her attorney decided not to have her on. That does not mean we are not carrying her voice forward. Her and the other 4 women who have stood with her to file a class action lawsuit against the city of Seattle. We have law firm Medina Orthwein, two partners, Felicia Medina, Shauna Madison, with us tonight talking about some of these issues. And everything that they're discussing is identical to what I read about the city of Seattle lawsuit. It's a common behavior, what is happening to Black women in the workplace. Joy, you were asking a question before the break that I cut you off. I'm sorry about that. What was it you were?
Yes, because I wish I had known all of you fabulous, badass women. Oh, I should have said that before when I was having these issues, like Shauna and Felicia. You know, my first question was, what are the red flags? And then my second question is, what should this employee, and I'm always going to say, what should this Black woman, what would be their first step? Is that to call someone like Medina Orthwein, or is it to go to, which they always tell you at companies like Kaiser, like Group Health, like
don't
Google,
go to HR.
Yes, they always tell you go to HR. There's an anonymous, employee, phone call that you can make to, report. And I'm like, so what is your recommendation on what someone in this situation, what would be the first step that they would take?
So first, we need to start taking our notes. When you get into a new corporation, look around and see who's with you. Monitor their careers. Encourage pay transparency. Encourage collegiality. Not talking about pay is going to hurt Black employees the most. And so we need to demand pay transparency, and where do you fall in the range, and why am I not at the next step, and what are the observable metrics that we can agree on for me to get to that next step. But like most things, it takes more than just you, and it could be a heavy burden on you. And I think I heard Joy say earlier, I regret, I wish, I this, like that. You're putting the onus on you, for sure. And we always do that, and take that onus and put it right on the powers that be, And so something that's come out of San Francisco is that Black employees organize, and I want to shift to Shauna to talk about the Black Employee Alliance. And so that's, taking it out of this corporate structure, the affinity groups, where the leadership is, they're going to claim that their hands are tied and they don't want to stick their necks out of these affinity groups. And they're allowed to, just have kind of meet and greets and things like that. But really, affinity groups could be used to be demanding more pay transparency, demanding access to the data, understanding what this secret, compensation department is doing this whole time, and what this EEO, reporting out to the government, and things that are being put out in the public, and all these great statements claiming that you care about Black lives, So there's a way to kind of start organizing in this kind of postmodern world that is definitely not post-racial, that we can look at, other municipalities and other organizations and see what they're doing. And then the other thing is the studies. So there's something just came out in the city of San Francisco by William B. Gold IV. I want to shift to Shauna to talk about that. But so far what we're seeing here is note-taking. Do not record anything. Most states, it's illegal to record. Don't feel like you have to record. That's already saying that you don't feel you're credible. That's like looking at it their lens that you're not credible. You don't got to record nothing. You have your notes, and you have, what you witnessed. And then, you're collecting data, and you're collecting, all the qualitative stuff as well, in terms of, different kinds of microaggressions, different kinds of responses to corporate statements, and, and then also kind of pick, your alliances. Studies show that newer generations entering the workforce, they even more so want to feel like anti-racist, and they want corporate accountability. So you kind of need to draw on those things. And of course, you should all you work this hard to have options, and you need to be able to have access to someone like a professional coach who's been in your industry, or an attorney that can balance all these things for you in terms of helping you carve a path for you to navigate whatever it is you're navigating, putting your health and welfare first.
And yes, I'd love to talk about the BEA, because they are the coolest, most radical thing that I've seen happen in terms of public entity employees banding together, separate and distinct from the union. I love unions, but they are separate and distinct, and they're fantastic.
Is that the Black Employees Association?
Black Employees Alliance, yes, in San Francisco. They're fantastic. So let me give you an example of some of the things they're doing. They've banded together. They have these meetings on a regular basis, and then they send out emails to some of the top people in San Francisco, including the mayor, London Breed, right? And so when they're sending out these emails, they're not just, airing their grievances. They're asking for documents, right? Via the public records request or other avenues to ask for documents. And then when they receive those documents, they quantify it. And then let me give you a more specific example. They were asking specifically for data regarding how Black employees are disciplined at the SFMTA, right? And so San Francisco, they gave it to them, right? It's a public records request. They then took that data, they quantified it, and then they saw that Black people were disproportionately being given harsher punishment and discipline in that particular entity. And then so they put it in a nice, beautiful little chart, sending right on back to San Francisco. And then they filed an EEOC claim against the city, which there's an article in I believe the New York Times or the San Francisco Chronicle, I think it's the Chronicle, about what they did. So that's banding together, requesting documents, taking it to the next level of actually looking at the documents and putting it into a tangible, cognizable, cause that says you're discriminated against me and it's clear. Now, here you go. I'm going to go to a entity that's supposed to protect me, like the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. I'm going to file a complaint, which is one of the things I'm sure Felicia will mention is something that you have to do before you go forward towards a class action, right? It's either the DFEH, the Department of Fair Employment and Housing, or the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. And so they're just laying the foundation in such a beautiful way of really holding the city's feet to the fire. And they did this while simultaneously either they knew or they didn't know about the William Gold report, which literally parrots what they found in the documents that they received. Black people, Black employees are being disproportionately disciplined at higher rates than non-Black employees, and that Black employees do not make up a majority of the higher manager staff. So that's clear evidence of discrimination. So I look forward to seeing what else they could do. They're a fantastic group of people. And I would advise people who are working at certain entities to do the same thing.
Yeah.
Let's talk for a moment about racial battle fatigue. And, and I can speak to this as a former plaintiff in a litigation. Going through an employment litigation trial is not easy. Second to having suffered in the workplace. And then you got to go fight for every single ounce of anything because we are not viewed as comparable or worthy of being severanced out or fixing the system, right? They would rather just abuse us to death and then push us out. And I know through my own trial, people don't want to come forward. They are afraid to step into the battle of Black because they will be further abused, and our emotional and mental health suffers greatly when you have to fight these people. I was trying to think of an appropriate word to say. Talk about how do Black people navigate the fatigue of fighting for every single thing. Yeah. Number one. And number two, what advice do you have to encourage people to come forward? Because class action lawsuits require, is it 30 people be on board, or isn't there a number? Is that, I don't know about San Francisco, I think you're 30 people.
There's some case law that says you need a minimum of 40. But really, it's the common policy, the glue that glues everyone together that is the key to a class action. And you can definitely have class actions smaller than 40, but it is better from a data perspective if there's, a bigger class to be had. And that's where lack of diversity and underrepresentation can really hurt you. And that's why you can make a lot of headway with respect to gender, because, theoretically, there will be a 50-50 ratio. But yeah. I'll shift to you all to continue on with this good line of questioning about racial battle fatigue.
Oh, yes. And so I want to start by explaining racial battle fatigue. It's a term coined by Dr. William A. Smith in 2008, right? He's well ahead of the curve in terms of this. And the definition that he gives to us is that it's a cumulative result of a natural race-related stress response to distressing mental and emotional conditions. These conditions emerge from constantly facing racially dismissive, demeaning, insensitive, and or hostile racial environments and individuals. Like,
that's every organization.
Thank you. That's like, 90% of the places that I go to, be it Whole Foods or some other entity, where it's just, you're really dealing with a consistent and ongoing basis of discrimination and demeaning and sensitive environments. So what he has done is to clearly outline that by having to battle racial discrimination or hostile work environments on a consistent basis, our bodies, our literal bodies become fatigued, right? And this is not necessarily a new concept. One of the very popular book called The Body Keeps the Score. It's where a Dutch sociologist does a very complete and overall analysis of how trauma lives in the body, right? It affects our somatic systems in a sense where our sleep patterns are disturbed. We're restless. We have poor digestion, dental problems because of grinding our teeth at night, right? Migraines, back pain, shoulder pain. And that's because you're holding the tension and you're hypervigilant, right? Exactly. Forgetfulness as well. And here's the rub. Just now in 2021, the CDC, the Center for Disease and Control, finally, woke up and they said, okay, yes, right. Oh, here's a thought. Racism is actually a public health concern, right? And this is to any Black person just roaming the earth. This is water is wet, right? This is not new to us, but I am actually happy that the CDC finally recognized this. And they went even further to state that racism unchecked can also create trauma that lives in the body, specifically increased rates of diabetes for Black folk and people of color, hypertension, obesity, asthma, and heart disease. So when we're looking at racial battle fatigue or any other, The Body Keeps the Score, or which there's another book that I like is called My Grandmother's Hands, which also talks about trauma in the body due to racial discrimination. When you're looking at all of these, this is the social theories and the academia that has been living outside of the legal world for far too long. Felicia and I are working very hard to start to incorporate this academia into our lawsuits, right? When you're talking about damages, you're not just talking about back pay, front pay, we're talking about pain and suffering, right? Emotional damages. But let's dive deeper. What are these negative and offensive entities actually doing to Black people's life expectancy? According to the CDC, it's lowering it, right? It's giving us obesity, hypertension, etc. According to The Body Keeps the Score and My Grandmother's Hands, both amazing books, we are just in a constant state of hypervigilance and fatigue from battling these things on a daily basis.
Do you feel like Kaiser's going to make this, like they're really in it to win it now, and they're going to put some real heart and policies in place that will go throughout the entire, because, I don't know if any of my friends who still were at Group Health, which is now Kaiser here in Washington, I don't know if they're feeling the same things that I felt when I was there prior to Kaiser buying it. And if they are, is Kaiser going to implement this throughout their whole structure from California, all the way up through Washington State?
And isn't it interesting that Kaiser Hospital's former CEO who passed away was a Black man? Bernard, what was Bernard's last name?
Oh, shoot.
I met him one time. But
Bernard Tyson.
Yeah, he died at a fairly early age.
Yeah.
Too. So you can make everything that you described, Shauna, about the fatigue of it. I mean, he clearly had to be dealing with the only syndrome, which is the Black executive trying to navigate all that BS, and having management staff that is creating that kind of a culture for people in the business. And, you know, did he recognize it? Did he ever address it? Those things don't get created overnight. They are built and they are rewarded. Those systems, the people who do that to Black people are often rewarded. I have seen the biggest abusers are the highest money makers because they will step over their own mother's grave for a damn dollar. And so they could care less about the brown and Black people's lives that they are torturing to have money. So the sickness of that is just woven into corporate culture everywhere, like everywhere. Every major company has those sick cultures there. I guess there wasn't really a question in there, but I was just, do you have a comment?
Very important points, you know, and no corporation, just because they do have someone, a Black employee in a position of power, should rest on that. That's, you know, that's maybe the beginning of the situation. But it is interesting what you were noting, Cindi, and to what Joy's getting at is like, how, you know, efficacious is this? You know, litigation, and I want to say litigation is imperfect. This is not a justice system. This is a legal system, and we think that things are A-okay in this system. And so it's time to kind of get laws and things that, and how we look at these things tweaked, so that way it's not continuing to perpetuate or stomping out meritorious claims. But there's something called coattail value, even if one person comes forward, and we never begrudge anyone for not coming forward. We just hope that you feel that you have community and support and resources and people that care about you all along the way, you know, in order to endure what you have been enduring and to go the next step in terms of being a class rep and having a duty to a class of people. And so even if an individual case is filed and we see all the headlines, you know, against Amazon, against Google, against, you know, various, you know, corporations, there's going to be coattail value to that. People are going to get promoted. They're going to start looking at the pay. They're not going to say it. They're not going to admit it, but you're already having an impact. Even if you lose, you have had an impact, and you did not just take everything, you know, at face value and move on. If you do, because you need to protect yourself or your family, then that is fine. It is not on you. It is on the people that have the power to actually implement the change. And so, you know, the thing about Kaiser is, yes, you know, what is to be learned by that is the power of leadership in being able to like work something out, as opposed to 4 or 5 years of litigation and a lot of things happening in that litigation. That's not good for your workforce. And so there have been other corporations that have settled on this kind of pre-suit basis where you exchange information. Let's talk merits. Let's exchange some stuff here. Let's have a, you know, equal playing field instead of, you know, you having all the information and us having none. And so Qualcomm also, their leadership were heavy Democratic, you know, contributors, and they also did the same thing that Kaiser did with me in terms of solving this on a pre-suit basis and coming to the court and saying, hey, and you know, you hate your docket. We have this nice thing already worked out here, you know, approve it and let's get notice out to that class. Mm-hmm. So that's one thing to note about the Kaiser case. And so from class actions, you will get what we talk about in terms of programmatic relief, and that is monitoring by us of what's to come forward. Okay. And so the only way to truly answer your question is to do longitudinal studies post, you know, lawsuits like this. Okay. And at a very minimum, at the very least, you know, what will be looked at for some period of time post the lawsuit is these, you know, employment outcomes that are disparate based on race. And sometimes a lot of our colleagues have, even after you know, suing and going through this whole process, you go right back and you have to sue again later on.
Well, money is the voice of the oppressor. That's what they're doing to, you know, Black people, is oppressing Black folks so that they can keep the earning power. I know exactly how that works inside. I explain some of it in my book. There's so much more about how you construe saving money in your pool so that it can get paid out to other people. Like, money is the voice of the oppressor. So it is the only way that we're going to get attention in these matters is to come forward with these class action suits. And it is time. One of Shauna or Felicia said it to our audience listening and to everybody who will be watching this video after the show. You got to come forward, because this is a movement. Like, we are past the individual people trying to stand up for justice and suffering when the whole race is suffering because of these corporate cultures and because they are populated with racist people. And so we got to deal with it now. Speaking
One
of,
point on that, yes, we have the class action device and we have the court of public opinion and a lot of very genius work happening by SCIU. A Black woman founded this program to have racial justice equity, index studies as they're using their power as shareholders to, dollars, in fighting this game in this very capitalistic society. And that is also taking shape. And so, and for all, the white people in corporate America, you saw, you are able to watch that horrible stuff that has been seen. And you saw your corporations make these statements. Like, you also have the power internally for the people that you claim to care about to say, hey, where is the proof? To your statements, where's the, a line item thing here that you've looked at employment outcomes. And if you are donating money into the community, is it really going to the Black community, or is it going to your friend who has a nonprofit who thinks that they're, a white anti-racist person? So there's a lot of things to look at there.
Sorry.
No, just litigation, public opinion, your power as a shareholder, associations, unions, like it has to do the whole thing, and you have to kind of be able to demand that things be studied and looked at, like we're seeing in San Francisco.
I think one of the ways to capture what is really happening is the corporations are performative in nature. They are saying things, they said it last year after the outrage of George Floyd, but it's been crickets for a year since all of that, nor did any of these corporations that I am aware of make any statements after he was found guilty. And so the corporate America who doesn't want to address white nationalism and white supremacy that is built into corporate culture, good luck on your diversity initiatives, because you are never going to fix it. And it will be through the means that you all are discussing tonight, which is people have to come forward and raise hell and fight to be seen and fight to be recognized and fight to be heard.
Yes, and I agree. And the one thing I will say is that if you truly feel as if you cannot come forward and be out and file these lawsuits and be on the face of a complaint, then be helpful, right?
Yes.
Call our entities. Call Felicia and I. If you happen to see, if you work in San Francisco and you're not on the face of the complaint, like your name isn't there, call us. Give us some background information. Give us some things that we could use confidentially to help forward this movement, though, right? Yes. So come forward or be helpful, right?
Mm-hmm. That's great advice. Great advice.
I love that you guys are in the Bay Area doing this. I'm from San Mateo, so that's my old stomping ground over there. And, I always felt like I came from this rainbow of a community, which I did. And then I moved to Washington, and I moved to this all white, somewhat conservative, racist area. And it's a culture shock for me. And to hear you all talk, and in my meeting Cindi and running for office, it's just, this is such a full circle for me. So thank you for what you guys are doing. I love it.
Well, thank you as well. We support you and hope that you go all the way. The Black Employee Alliance has expressed solidarity for, the city of Long Beach plaintiffs. And we also want to send all that solidarity over to the lawsuit that was just, filed against the public employer in Seattle. And if people have information for that lawsuit, call that plaintiff's attorney and give them that information. Take the time to do it and understand that, if you are a white person, you have a lot of power. And the credibility, if you don't say anything, what chance do you have? That your credibility is pretty dang instant. Yeah. And you can help with the credibility for Black plaintiffs who is the deck is completely stacked against. And so
I just want to take out. This was a phenomenal show. Look at how fast that goes by. So much information. Felicia, Medina, Shauna, Madison, we can't thank you enough for coming on and sharing with our community your insights about what the community needs to do. Amen. The fact that there are vehicles and tools to help get your voice heard. To our listeners who are watching this evening and who watch the show, Again, I just want to restate, if you are part of the city of Seattle, there is a lawsuit. The attorney on record is Oscar Desper at 206-521-5977. Please come forward and help deal with these issues because it takes a collective movement. This is not a moment, it is a movement. Felicia and Shauna, thank you so very much for coming on and doing this with us tonight. Blessings to all of you. Thank you, everybody, for joining our show tonight. I hope you have a good evening. Take care, everybody.
Thank you, Shauna. Thank you, Felicia. My girl.
For everybody that's black. Yo.